enterprises. We'll see if his comments get the attention that former Mayor Dave Bing got yesterday at the Detroit Regional Chamber's annual leadership conference, the policy conference in Detroit. Dave Bing, the former mayor, said that our city is not giving blacks enough leadership roles and that we are, quote, one incident away from becoming another hotbed of racial unrest like Ferguson, Missouri, or, heaven forbid, even like Detroit of '67 when we had the riots. Sandy Baruah is the president and CEO of the Detroit Regional Chamber. That had to really get people onto the edge of their seats, Sandy.
Well, I tell you, the former mayor was far more provocative than we certainly had anticipated. We didn't know exactly what he was going to talk about, but he certainly kind of got people's attention.
What was the reaction to what he had to say, though, to the content of his speech?
Well, it really kind of depends on how you read it. I mean, we created this entire conference really to focus on neighborhoods, taking the lead from Mayor Duggan, who has said that every neighborhood has a future. And, we really wanted to kind of expand on that theme that Mayor Duggan has been talking about and what we talked about at Mackinac, which is the issue of inclusion, which is, I think, what the former mayor was really talking about, which is, we do have to watch out for ensuring that the new prosperity that we're seeing across the city and across the region is shared by people from all walks of life. And, we talk a lot about that, as you know, Frank, up at the Mackinac Policy Conference.
Sure.
Last year, because there was all these national incidents, Ferguson and Baltimore, and we certainly don't want a repeat of that in Detroit.
Well, but those are all based on violence, and what the mayor's talking about is opportunity for business people. And we have that in Detroit, don't we? We have preferences that are exercised by the city of Detroit in hiring and in city projects and different contracts that are let by the municipality itself. We give preference by race in Detroit.
Yeah, I'm not defending Mayor Bing's remarks, nor am I speaking for him in any way. If you want to talk to Mayor Bing about what he was trying to say, you may want to talk to him. But you're absolutely right, Frank. I mean, from a city government perspective, I think the city has done a really fantastic job really reaching out to minority entrepreneurs, minority business people. I think when you look at what the Illiches have done and other organizations have done to ensure that their contracting base is diverse, I'm happy to defend that all day long. I think it's been outstanding. But I do think what Mayor Bing was talking about, and what even Nolan Finley has been talking about in Detroit News, and he had a session yesterday as well too, is where is the leadership? Are we seeing enough of the black leadership? And when I did talk to Mayor Bing prior to the event, what he was talking to me about is that, when he was a business leader, when he was CEO of Bing Steel, that there were a lot of African-American prominent business leaders who were taking prominent roles in our community, and he wasn't seeing that. And I think you heard that yesterday in his remarks as well.
Yeah. Well, but the other thing that sort of troubles me about it is when we take a look at who's investing in the city and we say, well, he's a white guy doing it, versus he's a black guy or he's a Hispanic. I just hate that we want to identify people and put them in their own little box according to their ethnicity, their race, whatever.
Well, we're certainly not doing that. And again, we view our job as the conference planners and as a Chamber of Commerce is to have an open dialogue. So, I mean, we're actually kind of happy that, Mayor Bing kind of pushed the envelope a bit with having a discussion because, certainly he is reflecting a view that is out there. It may not be a view that you and I share, Frank, but it is a view that is out there. And I think it's important just to kind of recognize that, and we can disagree about it, but I think having open dialogue is great. And from a conference planning perspective, we kind of really appreciate people who will kind of push the envelope. I mean, we've had union leaders, people like Bob King on our stage, we disagree with a lot of issues with them, but we're happy to have the conversation.
Yeah, well, I hear you on that, Sandy, and you're absolutely right. That it beats your cookie cutter speech about how wonderful things are, and let's all sing kumbaya. I think I'd rather have the open discussion about it if somebody feels this way. I may disagree, you may disagree. It doesn't matter, but I think you're right. It's great to have that discussion.
Yeah, we have speakers all the time at either the Mackinac Policy Conference or the Detroit the Detroit Policy Conference that aren't consistent with the chamber's policy positions, aren't consistent with my personal views. But I think it's great to have this kind of open dialogue. And frankly, one of the things that we've been trying to do with the chamber over the last 5 years is to really become a platform for more open dialogue. I mean, most chambers of commerce wouldn't even tackle the issue of racial issues and economic inclusion. But we think it's an important conversation to have in the Detroit region, and we're happy to have it. So most chambers of commerce wouldn't ever allow a union leader on their stage. But, we're happy to do that as well, too.
Yeah, well, I can't wait to see what you do for an encore now. This is going to be a tough one to follow up.
Well, again, the former mayor was far more provocative than we thought, but we think that's okay.
Yeah, he's Dave Bing, for heaven's sake.
Yeah, so, I mean, he certainly earned the right to share his thoughts.
You betcha, on a lot of different levels, as a popular sports figure, as a businessman, and as a political leader who went through, carried Detroit through some tough times, led Detroit through some tough times. So it's fascinating conversation. We're glad you joined us, and we'll look forward to chatting again soon. Sandy, be well.
Thanks, Brad. Say hi to Carl Rowe for me.
All right, will do. We'll see.
Please welcome the former mayor of the city of Detroit and founder and chairman of Bing Youth Institute, Dave Bing.
Good afternoon. As of June of this year, I will have lived or worked in Detroit for 50 years. Okay. I believe I've become relatively knowledgeable about this city and its people. Today, I want to share with you some of my thoughts about our past and some of my concerns and hope for our future. The important initiatives in my administration, and I'll get to those in just a moment, but they were public safety, public lighting, demolition, regional transportation, and they're still very, very important today in the current administration. In the summer of 1967, Detroit experienced one of the most costly and destructive urban uprisings in the history of our country. Although our population started to decline in the 1950s, it continued to significantly decline as a result of the white flight that followed the 1967 rebellion. Detroit's population went from about 1.2 million to somewhere hovering around 700,000 today. Because Detroit was a blue-collar, predominantly labor town, it was considered a hotbed of union activity. Detroit's automotive companies were the single largest employers in our state. Though the auto industry was still very strong in the 80s, the economy started to change. Many African Americans moved into the private sector, and black businesses became a significant part of Detroit's business landscape. Throughout the 1990s, over 10 black-owned companies in BE's top 100 were on that list. The Bing Group, Barden, Melfar Ford, Regal Plastics, Conyers, Ford, and Prestige Automotive Group, just a few that made the list. City government and the Detroit public school system were among, if not the biggest employers of African Americans at that time. Detroit touted the largest percent of home ownership in the country, with African Americans making up about 80% of our city's population and ownership. Detroit once had a significant number of political and community leaders that helped galvanize our city. Leaders like Coleman Young, Damon Keith, Art Johnson, Buddy Battle, Irma Henderson, John Conyers, and Horace Sheffield Jr. Generations of African Americans had positive role models. It gave them a broader view of themselves and their future opportunities. African Americans held several key political positions over a long period of time. In the past, the automotive industry was a fortress for African American small businesses and automotive suppliers. Globalization has changed that paradigm to include Latinos, Asians, and women. That has changed quite a bit in terms of African Americans having their place in the automotive industry. From a corporate standpoint, the majority of companies today don't have persons of color on its board, as officers in their companies, or managers with decision-making authority. We have always been a multicultural community, and it's important to have a wide range of people represented in all of our institutions. Today, unfortunately, those companies who say or think they're doing the right thing do not utilize, and in some cases don't support, African American businesses. There's little real inclusion or real opportunities for Detroit businesses or its residents. It's critical to have diverse participation, particularly in a city that is still majority African American. Black contractors and developers find themselves on the outside looking in. When given an opportunity, it's minuscule. For instance, a lot of talk about Paradise Valley. It's one block with 5 or 6 black developers vying for a piece of that pie. We need to enlarge that. That should only be a beginning. Detroit Economic Growth Corporation, or DEGC, did a remarkable job over years with tremendous odds during the really tough years in Detroit. Now there's been a complete turnover in the leadership in DEGC. None of the people that were there in the past are there anymore. They've got new leadership, and I'm not saying anything negative about new leadership. But when I was in office, George Jackson, as the president, had my support to do what was necessary for development in our city. I don't think that's the case today. There's nothing more important to economic stability than jobs. The unemployment rate in Detroit still exceeds the state and the nation. Leaders and organizations that once aggressively advocated for jobs and opportunities for Detroiters have become less effective. Today, in my opinion, we have a void in African American leadership. Organizations like New Detroit, the NAACP, and the Urban League don't have the same impact that they had in years past. Coupled with this, the African Americans have a limited voice via the media. The Michigan Chronicle has not effectively articulated the issues of importance to people of color here in the city of Detroit. the Michigan Citizen was unfortunately fallen to the victim of the economic downturn and are no longer here. Mainstream media continues to underrepresent the real issues of citizens in our city. There's little diversity in any position of authority in our local media. I believe this lack of diversity influences the way media covers the impact of state government on our cities and our citizens. Detroit public schools have been under state control for over the last 12 years, and it's been a colossal failure. There is still a deficit that needs to be addressed. Interference from the state has had a negative impact on not only our schools, but also many of our cities in Michigan. Emergency managers have had little or no significant success. Moving forward as a business community, we should not be comfortable. Next year will mark 50 years since the uprising in Detroit. Many of the negative social economic factors faced by African Americans then are once again prevalent in 2016. There are basically two families, the Illich family and the Gilbert family, responsible for the redevelopment of the city of Detroit. In order to continue our momentum, we need more involvement from others. Many African American Detroiters do not feel that they are a part of the redevelopment or resurgence of our city. In a recent Detroit News article, "Where Are the Black People?" Nolan Finley writes, near the top of the list of the challenges Detroit faces as it starts its post-bankruptcy era is avoiding becoming two cities, one for the upwardly mobile young and white residents of an increasingly happening downtown, and the other for the struggling and frustrated black residents trapped in neighborhoods that are crumbling around them. As much as we say or think that we're being inclusive, the reality is we're not. There is an undercurrent of frustration and anger that could lead to a negative outcome, a repeat of 1967. Detroit's not far from Ferguson, Baltimore, or Chicago, maybe just one incident away. Therefore, I say to you today, what can we do differently? We must advocate for the support, the appropriate revamping and improvement of Detroit's educational system. Local schools should be controlled by local communities. We must identify, hire, and promote African Americans within your companies. This will go a long way in from a meaningful inclusion. I suggest that you can provide professional volunteers to support upstart companies. This can be vital to the success of small businesses in the rebuilding of Detroit. African American economic empowerment and neighborhood development must be an essential part of Detroit's resurgence. I've maintained that I was never a politician, even when I was in office. However, I do maintain the support of African American leadership is crucial, important, and helps represent our diverse community. And finally, remember this: diversity is about counting people. Inclusion is about making people count. I want to thank all of you for being here, and I hope that you look to include as many Detroiters in your businesses as possible. We can do it together. Thank you.